Jean-Francois, or JF Dagenais, is the guitarist for Canadian band Kataklysm, who rose to prominence as part of the Quebec heavy metal scene in the 1990s. They have more than 10 albums and are responsible, in my opinion, for one of the greatest heavy metal tracks of all time called Blood on the Swans. In addition to his role as guitarist with Kataklysm, JF is also an award-winning producer and has since relocated to Dallas, Texas from Montreal, Quebec, which is where he joins us from today. It's 9 a.m. here on a cold winter day in Australia, and it's 6 p.m. there. How are we today, JF?
Very good. Thank you for having me. Yeah, it's a Dallas. We're 6 o'clock right now, and super hot as hell. It's probably like in 100 degrees something, but it's pretty usual for here.
Yeah, we were saying just before we turned on the mic. I always kind of apologize to guests when we get started because I don't want to ask you guys the same questions if you've been doing media all day.
Mm-hmm.
So what have you been talking about today? I mean, we're here to promote your new album. So, I mean, let's talk about that very briefly, but let's try to move the conversation somewhere else and tell us what you've been talking about with people today.
Sounds great. Well, it's a new album's coming up September 25th. A little bit of a change of sound. I think new elements were brought to the music. I now play a 7-string guitar versus the other albums, which I used to play on a traditional 6-string. And that's 7-string added a lot of beef and heaviness to the sound, and new textures and things I couldn't do before that are now in the on this record. And that was a bit of an exciting addition to what we do, because it just brought some new life to our music. And I've been enjoying like writing with the 7-string and playing it and stuff like that. So it's pretty much the main difference with what we used to do in the past, but it's the same intention and the same drive that we always had. And we even rekindled with some of the chaotic elements we used to have like in the early 90s, and we were trying to bring all that in a new sort of fashion and push the barriers of whatever it is we do, like even further. So that was the goal basically on this record.
Cool. That's interesting in and of itself, because as we're saying before we got going, I've got some old CDs listening to you guys. And so when I was sort of in my metal heyday, when we talk about the late teens, early 20s, that 7-string guitar was popularized by new metal bands like Korn. That seemed to drop off a cliff. So it's interesting that you're now picking that up and also integrating more of this gent sound that I would associate with guys like Meshuggah. What was sort of the decision to move into that space?
Well, I've always been a fan of these types of sounds, and the reason why I decided to go along with it now is that the 7-string guitars that they built and manufactured today, they're so much better than when they came out, because it was kind of an experimental thing. And now the quality of those guitars nowadays makes it so easy to actually have that super extreme low tuning, but it tunes like to perfection. And I can still play with the same intention and the same type of feel that as if it was a 6-string, but on with the lower tuning. So for me, it was like one of the reasons why when I picked up some new 7-string and I started playing them, I was like, okay, wow, this is just amazing, and I can do some new things that I always wanted to do on our records. But I always ask myself, why aren't we doing this? But at the same time, we were kind of trying to preserve, I guess, or the way we did things and our sound, and also the logistics, because changing the tuning means bringing more guitars when we play live shows, means bringing more gear and more things like that. And especially nowadays with the new restriction in place, it might be a bit scary to do those switches at this time in our career. But yeah, like the quality of the guitars nowadays are amazing. And I started writing new songs with my 7-strings, and I kind of showcased what it could be to the other guys in the band, and they were okay, we get it, let's do it, let's do the 7-string thing. And we upgraded, and Steph on bass had to get a 5-strings as well and get used to the lower tuning. And at first he was a bit scared, but after a few weeks and months of playing this way, it was okay. You were right. This is amazing, and
Scared.
it's just more guitar to play at the end of the day. Like you have more range and more fun, I think. And when I go back to my 6 string, I feel it's missing something.
There's a few things to unpack there. I mean, you talk about the quality of guitars have increased in that space. So a few things. So first of all, what makes the quality of guitars different today? And then I also wanted to ask you about your sound as a
yes, absolutely
non-technical musician. One of the things that's really interesting to me about the sound that you have is that it's a very low but very clean. I almost want to use the word accessible sound. It's a very sort of riff, easy driven heavy metal traditional sound, just very much lower. So where do you get that sound from, and what do you think is the big difference in guitar quality today compared to what you were saying previously?
Well, when it comes to guitar quality, one thing I'm looking for, and it ties in with the sound question, because one thing I'm looking for is to have a tuning that's super straight when I play, because we always played a bit lower than the typical metal band, and to achieve the same results of how straight the tuning is handled, I think the quality of the guitar nowadays, especially in the 7-string department, are so much better. And then when say you have that, like we're playing in the tuning we're playing in is F sharp, which is like super low, and you have a string tune in F sharp, and you try to play a chord on it. On the guitars back in the day, it would have sound like like the tuning is like you can't. Like
so
it's
they're more
low
consistent these days.
Yeah, it's so much more consistent. It's actually like a straight mean chord that's like dead on, and and that's how I always see the sound of the band, because I always wanted it to be perfection when I hit a chord, and to get that tone that I like, and I always like to have my sound super overdriven compared to what was happening back in those days. So I found a way to crank the overdrive without being over the top, and still, like you said, crisp and clear, but yet having that super low mid and low frequency punch that makes it growl. And that's what I was always looking for, is find a way to keep that growl and overdrive everything without crossing the threshold where it's unacceptable. Just keep it in check. But and the way bands used to do it was always like they would always set the limit a bit lower, because it's hard to get that much crunch into a tone without muddying everything and make it sound like a tin can, basically. So I found a way to keep the distortion and the growl and everything, and found the right combination of gear to achieve that, which is one of the amplifier that I've always loved using. It's a PV5150, one of the original models that I still own. It's the one I'm using right now. It's still the one I got like 20 years ago, because I find it's has such a great sound, and I try to play with the same amp, the newer versions of it, and it doesn't sound the same to me. It's just it's got to be my amp, and the way they manufactured it and that specific year, it sounds amazing to me. So I need that head plus a Mesa Boogie cab, and what I do is I crank the distortion with a tube screamer, a little green pedal that I have that I can crank half the distortion from the pedal and feed that through the head and push the preamp and the head to the maximum limit of overdriven without going overboard. So plus the pickups on my guitars, the pickups I've been using, the Fishman Modern Fluence. These are like so great, because they're kind of a cross between the typical active pickups that a lot of metal players are using, and the passive ones. So it's somewhere in between that. So you get the balls and you get the crunch and you get everything. So that whole chain makes up my tone, and it's been perfected through all the years of playing. I guess you fine tune it, but it's also very personal. I find, because I toured with a lot of guys that really like how we sound, and they were asking me the same, like, can we look at your rig? How can we kind of get that same growl that you get? And I'm like, okay, if you want to try it, no problem. So I give them the cable, and they plug their own guitars, and they're like, man, this sounds like crap. I was like, it's like it's a setting that works for my playing specifically, and it didn't work for other people. So I guess it's like that infinite quest of the perfect metal sound that you could get for yourself. It's very personal for yourself as well. So you have to experience and try a wide range of amplifiers and settings and pedals and guitars to get that perfect combination.
There's going to be a lot of people who listen to our podcast who will probably be unfamiliar with the band, and probably to a lesser degree heavy metal.
Okay.
I just wanted to ask, you know, do you want to sort of give people a 101 on where death metal is and what it is? Because a lot of people are going to go, oh, you know, probably the last metal record I might have listened to might have been something like Iron Maiden, and you're quite an extreme step for people that listen to that. So what do you sort of describe, or when talking to people who aren't avid fans of this sort of music, of where the genre is today?
Yeah, it's hard to describe. It started as something that was kind of it had really much of a punk attitude, in my opinion, when it started, in the sense that the players wanted to shock the audience with the most gruesome lyrics, the most extreme sounds they could possibly come with. And I think the reason why it got so big and so popular when it came out in the early 90s is because it was really shocking. And after a while, I think the initial shock value kind of disappeared, because a lot more musicians came up with more more types of impressing the crowd with their playing, and also the lyrics and all that. So, but I think the intentions is still to push music into a space where it's a bit outside of the box, and you wanna push yourself as a player. All of us, that's super important. We want to play with precision at speeds that are pretty much like retarded for any other genres of music. Because I talk to other people, and it's like when I tell them like the BPMs of our songs and the speed that we play, they're all like so it's kind of like it's the way I would describe it is, people are always familiar with bands like Metallica or Iron Maiden, because that's the big heavy metal kind of bands are out there. And I would describe it as like, take those bands, and if they were playing on crack at twice the speed, I think that's what we're trying to achieve here.
What's the Kataklysm story? So, as I said, I've got most of your discography, and there's a very noticeable shift in evolution and sound that doesn't actually stray from the genre. How did you get into the music? You know, and where do you think you guys are at now comparatively to you know, your early releases in the early to mid '90s?
Well, we're that band that started in high school. We've met in detention. We were kind of like the troublemakers in high school, and we were always the same little crew hanging out together. And we ended up talking about, hey, I play guitar, I play drums, like, let's start a band, like, why not rehearse this weekend and try to see how it sounds. And we started playing and annoying the neighbors with our loud noises, and it pretty much the high school story, that whenever we started recording some stuff. We got super lucky and got a record deal at a young age, and got thrown on the road with big bands of the time in the genre as a support band. And my first time in Europe, we were supporting Deicide at the time. It was 93 or 94, I think. And I was still in high school, and I told my teacher, like, okay, save all my homework and all stuff, all the stuff. I'm going to Europe for a month and play that metal. And we were like super young and driven. And somehow, like, I have a funny story. It's when we started this band and put out our first album, there was this guy that was really important in the industry. I don't want to mention his name, but he told us that, okay, enjoy this, guys, because you got 5 years, and then 5 years your career's over. The genre's not going to be anywhere near the popularity it's here, and that's basically the lifespan of a band in your style. And we're like, okay, well, we started. The intention was never to have a long-lasting career. It's just we loved what we do, and we wanted to go out there. We just kept going, doing what we do, and the thing grew bigger. And we the family that we have, this bond we share with the fans and all that, it just kept growing bigger and bigger. And eventually, we started seeing money coming from doing this, like a paycheck, and we were all shocked. Okay, we got home and we actually saw some, and we thought, okay, let's kick this to another level. Like, why don't we try to make this professional and try to push ourselves to a place where we can actually have a career out of this? And that's what we did with the album called Shadows and Dust. And that's the first time we actually started to see like a real paycheck and turn this band into a real business. And then we just kept growing from there, and all the way to this new record, which I can't believe. Like, you look back and I can't believe the amount of tours and albums and things we've done. But it's weird because it doesn't feel like 30 years for me. It feels like we've been doing this, like, it was a lot shorter in my mind, but we accomplished so many things. And now musically, I think we try to still be relevant as a band, and that's why we want to keep pushing what we do and not just repeat the same tune over and over and over. We want to make something that makes sense artistically, because I think that's the challenge we have now as a band after 30 years, and we want to be relevant artistically and reinventing ourselves, yet remaining true to the roots and all that.
This is you're kind of going into where I'd like to talk about, because it's really interesting in terms of the popularity of early 90s death metal. I guess the perceived imagery and violence around the scene, and where that leaves sort of heavy music today. So I guess we'll kick off into that space. I mean, initially, as I said, with more extreme bands, there's anti-religion, there's violence associated with it. That I think will always remain as part of the scene. But as someone who is maturing and getting older like myself, it becomes very, very hard to have this conversation with people who don't listen to this music, because I'm sure, as you would know, everyone just goes, "Oh, that's the Kill Baby music, isn't it?" And I go, "Well, it kind of is, but there's a lot more to it." Kataklysm has always avoided being associated directly with that, ultra violence and aspect of it. Do you find the same thing, that perception, or the fact that the genre just wallows in that, can be a little bit tiring and exhaust the fact of what actually exists, further within that music?
Yes, I mean, when it's like I said, when it started, that shocking value and killing babies and Satan and all that, that was like the big thing at the beginning, that people got shocked how brutal that metal was. But like, you grow older, and like, we're all in our mid-40s in Kataklysm, and it's important for us to still write lyrics that are relevant to what we live and how we feel. So a lot of our lyrical content would still be fitting within the extremity of the genre, but it still has some grit, but it's stuff that we care about, that we talk about, and we put that in our lyrics. And sometimes it's metaphorical, but most of the times it's pretty straightforward. And it was always important for us to be that way, because we didn't feel we belonged with the Satanists. Nobody's religious here in our band, and we're more of a agnostic kind of type of ideology. Like, we don't really care that much about that side of things, and then again, we don't want to start butchering babies and kill all the women and children. That was never our thing either. So we try to be an uplifting band. We talk about our career and what we did, and in a motivational way, where we're like, okay, if you don't give up and you believe in what you do, you can achieve things. And that's more our line of lyrics. And sometimes we go a bit darker, like on this new song, The Kill Shot. We talked about a little bit of revenge and sometimes in life, like, taking justice in your own hands is the only way to go, and things like that. Like, we will touch some of these subjects, but the new album's called Unconquered, and the reason is we're talking about our career and everything we struggled through and that we won over, and then we're still here, and we're proud to still be here, and we feel we still have that fire, and we still feel that there's gas in the tank to keep going, and we've achieved a lot coming from high school in Quebec, and I just feel that sometimes we're miles away from what death metal was when it started, but it's still that aggression and that angst that we had in high school. I think it's still here somewhere inside. And when I pick up the guitar, I'm not an angry person. I have a great life. I have no reason to be angry. I have a wife and a 5-year-old daughter here in Dallas, and I'm loving where I'm at in my personal life, and I'm loving where I'm at with my business career life, with the band and all that. And there's no reason to be angry, but for whatever reason, I pick up the guitar, put it around my head, and then just I start playing, and then it all comes out again.
I get it.
And that's where it comes from, I think, for Kataklysm. And I think the fans have been supporting the band for so long. They must like what we do somewhere, and feel somehow the same. Like, I think music is meant to touch people in some way, and I think we can reach a lot of people with that type of music.
So what do you think? I mean, obviously, at the moment, people will probably be listening to this interview years from now, but at the moment we're dealing with coronavirus. Everyone's sort of shut down and furloughed at the moment. But what do you think, prior to this, is the actual state of heavy metal and music? Well, one of the things that I guess has bothered me is that it seems that there hasn't been any new breakthrough bands almost that I feel like realistically in the last couple decades. Like, when you look at the big heavy metal festivals, it's still the same 10 bands that end up headlining multi-day festivals, and has been for about 5 to 7 years.
Yeah.
You guys are on the road doing this stuff. There's people showing up to your shows, but it certainly doesn't feel like it would have been in the late 90s or in the 80s. Where do you sort of think the scene is at?
It's strange. It's a scene that it's very welcoming to new talent and new bands, but to get that status of like your classic band, it takes such a long time. And I think for Kataklysm, we're kind of reaching that status where we're getting the good offers for the festivals, and the positioning is starting to be really decent. We're usually towards the end of the day on a good day before all the big acts. that you're talking about. And but I think the time it took to get there is pretty ridiculous. And yeah, it would be nice to sometimes to give a shot to younger bands to be able to propel themselves to that level. And I don't know if it's because of the fans that kind of get stuck on those bigger bands, or I think personally, I think it's more on the industry side that trying to protect the way things are, and are being super conservative about everything. So they keep putting the big names as last, and of course they draw people and they have fans, but I think there's a lot of bands that do well and they don't get the chance to be there, and it's a bit sad. But for us, I'm not going to complain for us, because we do well when we tour. We do well on the festivals as well, positioning and all that, and I think we've achieved a level that's very respectful for what Kataklysm is. And
I'll re-ask the question this way: Do you think the state of heavy music is as good as it was 10 or 20 years ago?
I think it's strange, because you see it less in the mainstream again. Because when it started, it was kind of like this very underground movement, and then it got big, almost too big for what it is at some point. I'd say in the
early 90s, like 91, 92.
Yeah,
that sort of period.
It got really ridiculously big, and then it got somewhat back to the underground. But I feel things are much better for us personally now, because there's a crowd that's there, and I think I'm not exactly sure how to tap into it if you're a new band to get your name out there. I think there's a lot of more things available to you now, like say to be able to self-promote with the online, all the streaming services and the social media and everything that we have today. None of that existed when we started. It was when we toured, there was not even GPS to get to the next city, because that wasn't invented. Yes, there was no internet. So, I feel we started our career before electricity, and now all these things came along and it helped.
I'm blown away when I talk to a friend. Depending upon who I'm speaking with, I could mention your name or Belfigor or The Art Is Murder. No one knows who these bands are, and then I go onto YouTube, and one of their tracks has 4 million views, and I'm blown away. It's kind of like, well, who do I know that doesn't know who these bands are that exist in the world today?
Yeah, it's. I think the metal genre has become underground again, but it's there and it's strong, and there's plenty of fans for plenty of bands, and there's new bands that comes and they do well, and it's still alive and thriving, and it's a worldwide thing, because we get to tour everywhere. We've been to Australia, like where you guys at, and Japan, and Indonesia, and Asia, and South Africa. South Africa was a great scene. I was blown away. We played Cape Town and Johannesburg quite a few times, and every time like packed, and like people from all different kinds of cultures come to the show, and they're like, yeah, in front, and it's amazing to see. It's a worldwide thing. It's there, but I think it's not really under it's kind of under the radar, because I think what works right now, it's like the electronic stuff and hip hop and rap, and that's like on top of the charts everywhere. And even the mainstream rock is not as big on the radar on a worldwide level. But there's so many fans still everywhere, like, that are into the stuff, and they come out when it's a good band touring or a good package of bands together, and they depending, no matter what subgenre of heavy metal it is, there's fans for it, and like a diehard that's been in it all his life, and fellow metalhead that I am, I always wished for bigger things, but
Yeah.
who knows where it leads.
As I said, before we turn this on, I know you guys because I used to watch you guys tour around 2000s when you guys were just building a name. I saw you guys on the In Shadows and Dust tour, I think touring with guys like Cryptopsy. One of the things that was really interesting to me around that time, again, as someone who's not a musician, just simply a fan of the music, is in Canada, back when I was living in there, the Quebec death metal scene, as it was considered sort of a torchbearer, almost the same way that you would think of, you know, the Swedish death metal scene, and people would say that that was the core of where death metal came from. I want to talk to you about that scene, but there's two bands that were really notorious from that scene, and that was Cryptopsy and Gorguts, I remember. And the people that were really into music said these are the pinnacle, and still to a lot of people, Cryptopsy is really seen as the most technical, extreme sort of band you can get in that space. I just wanted to ask you to JF to shed some light on this, because as I said, as someone who's not a musician, this is sort of theoretical or philosophical to me.
Well, Quebec, I think my explanation of why it was such a successful area for this type of music is that we have the kind of like the cross of cultures between the Canadian American culture, and then we have a lot of the European background because of the French thing, and it's kind of like a cross of hybrid of culture, and I feel that as an artist, when I started playing in bands, it always seemed so lively, the scene, and the way Quebec people accepted the music from Europe in the same way as the music coming from the States or from Western Canada. It was really thriving, and that cross created some hybrid bands that created some great things. And there's nobody else in the world sounding like Cryptopsy or like Kataklysm or Gorguts. It's very unique, and there's a lot more new bands coming nowadays that also sound very unique and always sounded a little bit on I'd say crazy or schizo almost on in a way. But Cryptopsy, it's cool that you mentioned those guys. We started Kataklysm in October of 1991. I think the first rehearsals I took part, and we started looking for a practice spot, and we found those guys, the Cryptopsy guys, were looking for partners, and so we shared a rehearsal space for like 4 years, and that was back in the original days with the original lineups with Lord Worm and all that, and yeah, we shared the spot, and we had half of the week was ours, the other half was these guys. Where we were kind of listening to what each other was doing, and we didn't want to copy each other, but it was kind of like a friendly competition in the sense that who was the craziest, who was the fastest, and blah blah blah, and then we turned out to be pretty like two flip side of the coin basically for the genre. I think and I'm happy that both our bands made it to that level of recognition that is hard to achieve for any band nowadays. And I don't know what it was, but it was just a special era with the right elements aligned to create this thing.
Do you, when you tour internationally, you know, I said, I know you as a Canadian metal band. That's sort of a pride that I have in you guys. Are you recognized as a Canadian heavy metal band when you tour, or are you just sort of a mix of a more traditional death metal band in terms of how you're perceived when you tour internationally?
No, everybody knows we're from Canada, and it's always advertised like Kataklysm's Canadian everywhere we go. It's important to us. We're proud Canadians, we're proud Canucks, and we carry the flag everywhere we go on the planet, and that will never change. Like two of us moved to the U.S. Mauricio is not in Florida. He was in Chicago for like 15 years, and I moved to Dallas 10 years ago, and we're both American citizens, but we're still gonna remain Canadian in the heart for forever. I think it's important.
How does that happen? Tell me about what is the catalyst for deciding that you want to relocate to the States?
Well, for me, it was personal. I met my wife, and she was from Dallas. And at first, when we first started dating, she came to live with me in Canada for a while, and she absolutely loved it. But she doesn't speak French, so it was kind of hard for her to adapt. Say, if we were to be serious and do this, then she would have to learn a whole new language. And also, when I'm on the road, we were on the road a lot. She has no friends, no family, so it made more sense for me to go south and move to Texas. But for me, my decision was based on, I really liked her and I wanted to pursue this. But I really loved Dallas as a city, and every time I was there, I had such a great time. I love the weather. It's always sunny. It's always super warm, and just to get away from the snow was something nice for me.
I feel the same living down here.
I'm a proud Canadian, but when you taste how things are somewhere else where it's warm, and I'm like, that's when my Latin blood heritage comes alive, and I'm like, yes, this is perfect. So it would be hard for me to go back. I miss my family and some of my friends I have there, and the way some things are over there. But I adapted here very very well, and I like the way. I like how easy things are in the U.S. if you want to achieve anything, or even the lifestyle I have as a musician. It's kind of a bit outside the norm, so to speak, when it comes to the finances and like. I find the way the American system is, it's so much easier to function there with the lifestyle I have, because there's a lot of opportunities. If you play your cards right, it's so easy to function. I got there, they gave me tons of credit right away at the bank, and all that, and like it's like so easy to. If you want to start a business, and especially in Texas, I moved my recording studio here too at home, and I do that when we're not on the road. I mix and master bands and record bands. I do this in my house. That's my little spot here.
Yeah,
and I to get that on the legal business level, to get that going is so much easier in the U.S. and especially Texas, because Texas there's even looser laws for businesses than anywhere else in the U.S. So for me, it was easy to adapt, and I really I would be hard for me to go back to Canada after living here 10 years.
I know that we're running out of time, and I think you've still got some other media commitments otherwise, but one of the things that I really wanted to ask, and I always like to ask artists about this, especially the fact that you've been around for almost 3 decades in the space, how has, I guess the internet is really the issue, but how has digital music changed the way that you guys make a life for yourself these days, when I guess CDs don't really matter anymore?
Yeah, I mean, the way things work, I mean, because we're such an old band, we have a huge catalog, and that catalog keeps being streamed on all the platforms. And whenever we put out a new release, it kind of triggers the new fans or our followers. They go back on the discography and they stream it like crazy. So the fact that we have like all these records on there, it generates a decent amount of money versus like a band that's new and coming out with one record. Like we have a lot of music to be streamed, and that helps generating some money, and that goes towards the production of the albums. Like we can afford working with big guys. Like we always self-produce our albums, but we always hire an external set of ear for the mixing and that sort of thing, and we get somebody that famous that does some big stuff, and we that gives us the financial to be able to do all that. And I think other than that, Kataklysm has always been a strong live band, a active touring band. So a lot of the money comes from the concerts themselves and the t-shirt sales and all that. So it doesn't change much in our career. And if anything, I find it's almost more promotion these days with the way things are as before, where it was really word of mouth and people would buy CDs and tape trading and all that. But I find today it's easier to get across. Anybody can just pick their telephone, go on Apple Music or Spotify and Google the band and just click here, play. And I find we have a lot more followers nowadays because it's easier to reach fans with less than before when we started, where we had to push like crazy.
Has the revenue come back through Spotify? Because I remember going back, 10 years ago, artists would say there's no money because everyone's downloading and illegally sharing this. So have platforms like Spotify actually worked out really well for you guys then?
I think it's better. It's definitely could be better and improved. And I feel like sometimes it's still a bit ridiculous, the amount of money that gets paid for like one stream. But because of the amount and the quantity of stream, we do get some income out of that, and it's relevant in that sense, and it's been doing good for us. But obviously, we all wish it could be even better, but it's not terrible. It's better now than it was 10 years ago, that's for sure. Because at some point, it kind of was the dark ages of the industry where nobody knew what was going on, and a lot of artists got ripped off at some point in time. I think nowadays it's better, but definitely hoping that it gets even better and things keeps on progressing. As now we're really turning into the streaming age, and less people are buying the physical copies. So that's the future, and you can't try to backpedal against it. It's not going to do any good. You just have to embrace it. And you embrace it, and you try to work the best way possible with the new way things are. And I'm sure it's going to keep on evolving and changing, and you just have to roll with the punches as an artist.
Awesome. Well, JF, thanks very much for your time today. New track sounds great, and hopefully we can see you on the road once we get over the hill of all this COVID stuff.
Thank you so much for the time, and this was nice. It was refreshing.
Awesome. I hope so. Cool. Well, hopefully we will see you live at some point. Thanks very much for your time.
Yes. Thank you.